Welcome back, everyone. Lovely to see technology working and with us this time. So really happy about that. And I would like to say thank you again to our sponsors, Crawford Technology, DQ, and also the partnership we have with Accessible EU, and of course, EDF, our collaboration partner with this event, and also Digital Europe, who has organized for this nice little venue that we are in Brussels. So now we move on to the next panel session, a little discussion about accessibility improvements. So now we're trying to take the perspective of the public sector bodies who are, where everything should be happening. So the ones that are in charge of making sure that the interfaces are accessible. So I have asked Peter Kemeny to do a short introduction to the topic and also giving you a little bit of the highlights of the workshop we had yesterday, and then it's the same setup again. We have some questions for the panelists, and then we open up for Q&A from the audience. So Peter, please.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. So the question is about compliance and user needs and the public sector perspective. And I think what I would like to talk about mainly is the public sector and the user perspective together, the dialogue between the public sector body and the users. So let me start just quickly an overview of the tools that the directive provides, the Web Accessibility Directive provides for improving accessibility. Public sector bodies need to make the websites accessible, obviously, and they have to publish an accessibility statement that declares and explains the level of accessibility of the website. And of course, there should be monitoring by the monitoring agency and enforcement by the enforcement agency. And that's the second tool. And the third one is the end users feedback, which I think it's a groundbreaking legislation in the sense that it makes it obligatory to provide a feedback mechanism. So it's not just a possibility, it makes it a right to provide feedback. And I would like to focus on the last two, so the accessibility statement and the feedback by the users. With each of these tools, there should be a dialogue between the public sector body and the users. So the public sector body publishes an accessibility statement, but it's not for its own sake. It's not only to checking a box. It should be a useful tool. It should be a useful tool for the user to know in advance if they should actually bother with the website. Is it expected to be accessible? And if there's an error, if it's already known by the public sector body. And then there's the feedback possibility or right, so they can react on these errors. And to that, the public sector body should provide an answer or a reaction. So it should be an ongoing dialogue that would help both the public sector bodies and obviously the end user, because that's the main aim, to make websites accessible. So as we mentioned before, the last year we had the review, or the Commission had the review of the Web Accessibility Directive, and our company was involved in that. And I would just list some interesting findings that are relevant here. First was that came through the interviews we had with public sector bodies, and also in the report, that public sector bodies are actually interested in making their website more accessible. And they want to do that. They answer positively to the monitoring bodies, monitoring or their feedback. So that's a good thing. We cannot say that they are not, in general, not interested. But what we found is that some public sector bodies don't know that it's a real need. Okay, there's a legal obligation, but actually we didn't see it. Nobody told us. There was no user saying that our website is not accessible. So should we really spend money on it? Maybe our website is not looked at by persons with disabilities. That takes us to the second point, feedback. It's not only important for providing, making the public sector aware of certain issues and use the potential of the users, their knowledge about accessibility to pinpoint accessibility errors. but it's also an awareness raising possibility. If a public sector body doesn't get any feedback, then they might say that, okay, we don't really need to do it. But it doesn't mean that users should provide feedback. So it's a very important thing that we have to always declare, that it's a right, it's a possibility, but in the end, it's the responsibility of the public sector body to make the websites accessible. So they should not rely on the users, but they should really use their help, which takes us to one of my favorite sentences in relation to feedback, that feedback is a gift and it should be handled like that. It's something that the user is willing to spend time on in order to, of course, make their own life better or easier, but to help public sector bodies to do what they should do, what they have to do. And of course, the third finding is, but unfortunately, there's not enough feedback. So that's the second finding. That should be boosted. The public sector bodies should work on making feedback more frequent or more possible. The third finding is that what was mentioned, that skills are missing and guidance is needed, but that's not the topic of this session. So what should be done? First, let's talk about the accessibility statement. Yesterday, we had a discussion about that as well. And user feedback was that the main problem, if it's not findable or not even there, if it's not accessible, obviously, and if it's there and accessible, it shouldn't be vague. It should explain the accessibility issues. It should be understandable. It should be, again, not just checking a box. So an ideal accessibility statement is, as I mentioned, is a tool for the end user about the level of accessibility, about how to handle the website. It should send a clear and easy message about the accessibility level, but also, very importantly, the intentions or the approach of the public sector body to accessibility. Importantly, the deadlines for fixing the issues should be stated, and it has a double value. It's not only kind of forces the public sector body themselves to fix an accessibility issue because they promised it with a deadline, but the user would know that the public sector body takes it seriously, the issue. They really want to fix it, so there will be a vote of confidence, and that's very important, that there's trust between the public sector body and the user. And finally, it should, of course, refer to the feedback mechanism, which takes us to the feedback. And I would like to mention that we have a project about user feedback. It's called UPower. And it's kind of, the main idea is to provide, in the end, training to end users on how to provide accessible, actionable feedback that the public sector body can use right away or use most probably right away, maybe with some clarifications. We have published a toolkit about explaining the feedback mechanism and the challenges and some solutions. There's a repository for public sector bodies to make their feedback mechanism better. It's a list of good practices, and soon there will be a curriculum published, a model curriculum. The website of the project will be put in the chat by my colleagues, and we'll share it with the audience here as well. So an interesting thing about feedback, what came up yesterday, that the story was that a user, there's a lot of accessibility issues, and the user could provide feedback from the moment then they wake up to the moment they go to sleep. But that's, they have better things to do. So they have to choose, or they would choose where to provide feedback. So if just imagine that you go to a website, you find an accessibility issue, you want to report it, and the feedback mechanism is not accessible, you will just give up, which leads us to a paradox that maybe websites which are the least accessible might get the least feedback. So as I mentioned in the beginning, feedback is good and public sector bodies would actually welcome, but they should be aware that they should actually compete for the feedback. So it's not something that's given, it's a gift, and there's a limited resource of feedback. So they should make everything, they should do their best to get that feedback, because it's a very good tool and it's unfortunately very much underused at this point. And that brings me to the last point, an interesting discussion that came up yesterday as well, that if providing a feedback is of course, it's burdensome, it needs work. Sometimes maybe it would be even enough just that the user just signals that, hey, you have a problem with your website, and then start to dialogue and see if the public sector body is responding, and then provide further details. That is not an ideal thing, but it just kind of nuances the whole feedback mechanism and the whole feedback ecosystem. So what can a public sector body do to make this dialogue better? First of all, making the websites accessible, providing an accessibility statement and a feedback mechanism is not a checkbox. There's a user, not just checking a checkbox. There's a user behind it, and the main idea is to make the website and these procedures accessible for the user. So they should consider all user needs, not just focus on like only give the possibility to give written feedback. There should be various feedback channels provided. And respect the users who give the feedback. So answer them, react, start a dialogue, and treat these feedbacks as a high priority, even more so now when there's not enough for them, or there's just generally a low amount. But even later on, public sector bodies should work on finding a mechanism that prioritizes accessibility feedback, because in the end, it's about communicating with the end user. It's about providing public service. So it would be efficient if the message goes actually through. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. So thank you very much. We have a large and distinguished panel today to discuss this. So we have Katie Durand from the French Organization for the Visually Impaired. I've not tried to say that in French. And then we have an expert, Mohammed, and I don't dare to say your last name, but you can.
Malekzadeh.
Yeah, that is too difficult for me, but it's very beautiful. Thank you. So joining us from Deutsche Bahn, where you work as a senior developer and accessibility expert, so kind of an internal expert, if you will, making sure that that Deutsche Bahn, that the trains leave on time, I guess was your, no. So that was not your job, but to make sure that it's accessible, your information. And then
I'm
online.
more successful in my work, okay.
Yes, yeah, okay, very good. And then we have, not last but not least, online, joining us from Germany, I guess, Gottfried Zimmermann, who is the director of Competence Center of Digital Accessibility at the Hochschule der Medien, Hochschule der Medien, I think is the name. So welcome, Gottfried. I know you're from standardization and many other things. So you are now here as also representative for the public sector as a university, being the public sector. And unfortunately, Lidia Best, who is the president of the European Federation of Hard of Hearing, should have been with us today, but she has gone ill, so she's not joining us. But I think we can manage also in this with this group of people. So I wanted to start with Gottfried. As a university or in scope of the directive, what are the most positive results of the monitoring from the Web Accessibility Directive? And are there any unintended consequences or problems that you have seen around the monitoring activities, if any, or just anything happening around the directive from your perspective?
Yes, thank you. I hope you can hear me.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm basically here with two hats on. So one is I'm professor at a higher education institution, and as a director of the Competence Center, but with basically no power to change things at my university. I'm just there to kind of consult them and other universities and other public bodies. And the second hat is me working within multiple committees, seeing what's happening, for example, in the state of Baden-Württemberg and beyond in Germany. And I'm sorry, I have to say, my impression is that there's not a lot improvement. It's a lot of stagnation. And maybe the improvement is it has come to the awareness of people that there is such a topic, but there are only a few universities and also public authorities who take this topic really seriously and have started to educate their staff and their personnel so they can really make things accessible from ground up. And the big problem I see is, we all know the Web Accessibility Directive and the monitoring agencies, they can test websites and apps, but they cannot enforce changes. They have no power to change things, no power to give tickets or fees. That would really hurt these institutions. One difference may be what I hear like from Ireland and other countries where they have kind of a blame list of, and they make their results public, but not so in Germany. It's I've actually talked to the head of the local monitoring agencies, and he says it's not allowed to make such a blame list. So the problem really is it's good to test, but in this form right now, it is, I would say, partially a waste of tax money, because we know there's something wrong, but there's no power to fix it.
Thank you, Gottfried. We'll get back to the solutions later. So I wanted to ask Katie, so in France, well, the French government is not really doing the monitoring the way the EU wanted it to, but you are having you're a very interesting situation. You kind of took this into your own hands a little bit in your organization. Can you tell us about your initiative?
Absolutely. So I work for the French Federation for the Blind and Visually Impaired, and we are responsible for advocacy for all. We work on behalf of and for a number of organizations working with people with visual impairments. And we, as Detlev said earlier, digital accessibility is very much something that cuts across all areas of life and all the areas that we work in. So culture, education, all of these fields. And we felt that it was really important to focus and help our users understand what is being done, and more importantly, what is not being done in relation to legislation. So we set up a dashboard where we go in and check. We're in effect doing what the government should be doing. We're currently checking about 2,200 websites listed there. And we're checking whether they're fulfilling their basic requirements. So we're not checking the actual accessibility, but we're looking at what they're declaring that they've done, which is in effect what the monitoring bodies would be doing too. And the results are absolutely terrifying, as you would imagine. Just to give you an idea, there are only 68 sites out of the 2,194 sites that are controlled by the dashboard that are currently meeting those requirements. So we feel that our users need to know that, and this comes back to this feedback mechanism. We need to make sure that they feel empowered and that they're aware of their rights, and they are accompanied, if you like, by us to try and push them to make sure that their voice is heard and that they can use what is part of their national infrastructure.
Thank you. And I think we can also share that link in the chat to that French
absolutely.
Statistics. So that's very interesting. Thank you. And Mohammed, we talked a little bit about feedback yesterday. So how do you know what the users of the Deutsche Bahn interfaces think about it? And how do you monitor internally, or how do you make sure that you are doing the right thing?
Yeah, okay. The Deutsche Bahn, or the German Railways, is first some places public sector, but it's private economy. So 2025 we will get monitored by external partner or whoever the monitoring gets. We haven't we aren't a part of this. They must decide, the government decides who monitor us. But of course, we have internal monitoring. We have a whole department who only is there to get feedback from the people with disability, and they collect and stay in touch with the organizations, and the feedback will be collected. And the Deutsche Bahn, the German rail station, is a very big company, so 100 sub-companies, and you must first find who is the elder set, who should know that there is a problem. So you must find the product owner, first of all, of the product to give them the information that you have collected. Yeah. So we stay in touch with the organizations and ask for them. But of course, we know we have some places that people can contact on the site, but it will really seldom used. So we can say the most time people send a mail and says, why does it work? Okay.
So, but at least that is, even if it's not kind of a formal feedback mechanism, you do get the feedback, and then you just have to make sure that you have a process internally, which I think is equally important in any organization. A larger organization is hard to find the one responsible, or hard to know how to process all this information, because feedback is good, but then you need to take action in a good way. So I think that is something also shown in the UPower project and other research. So Peter, why don't end users provide feedback to the extent that the Commission wanted when they made this setup?
Yeah, well, I think not only the Commission wanted, everybody wanted it. No, not to correct. We did extensive research asking both end users and public sector bodies about the possible reasons, and what we learned, it's a manifold thing. So what I mentioned already, users might not be aware of this right, so that brings us to that more awareness raising should be done, which was a point we got to many times yesterday, that it's an obligation for the member states to raise awareness, but it has many levels. So they should also raise awareness about the feedback mechanism and this right. So that's one thing, they might not be aware, there might not be a feedback mechanism at all, or it might be difficult to find. Then there are other soft, so to say, soft reasons. If a user has a bad experience in the past with public sector bodies, that they don't respond, or they see that the public sector body most probably is not really interested in accessibility, in making their communication, their website accessible, then they are prone to not give feedback, which is, I think, very human and very normal. So that brings me back to the point that public sector bodies should compete and fight for getting that they get the feedback, maybe not another public sector body. So those are the main reasons. Also, that another thing that the project directly tries to handle or help is that it is sometimes handled as a very technical issue. End users might not know that, well, is this an accessibility issue that the public sector body is obliged by law to fix or to avoid? Am I able to correctly explain the problem? So the message is that yes, any problem you should give feedback, or you could give feedback on, so don't hold yourself back, and you just try to explain as good as possible. It is important that there's feedback, and there should not be any like self limitations like that. So these findings are listed in the toolkit, which can be downloaded from the web page, and I think it's a very extensive or kind of whole, more or less whole perspective of the spectrum, that there are many reasons, and the end result is that if the users trust that what they say is interesting for the public sector body, then there would be more feedback.
Okay, thank you. And Gottfried, what do you think? How could the university universe as a whole get more feedback, or do you think that would be useful to make them more aware? Because you said that they may be not super engaged in this topic yet. So would user feedback open a door, do you think?
Yeah, I was just gonna respond to that. I think it may be helpful for 10%, the best 10% of public authorities. We heard that only 16% of public websites have some degree of accessibility built in. We just heard that this morning. And that was only checking for 8 of the 90 criteria of websites. So I think feedback, okay, but if you look at the accessibility statements, if you look at websites of public agencies, they are well aware of their inaccessibility of their websites. So they already, and they get the feedback from the monitoring agencies. By now, every public agency, I guess, or most of them have got some feedback by the monitoring agency, and they got very detailed feedback what they have to do. And many of them are not reacting. They just don't have the power. They don't have the priorities to change that. So I think, yes, it's okay. It's really important to value the feedback of users. But the first step, the prerequisite is to do what you know it's needed to be done to get to a ground level, to a basic level of accessibility. And then you can build in the user feedback and make it even better. But many users will just not be able to even get to the feedback contact form or so, and then feedback is really not helpful.
That's really true. It's kind of a catch-22, but I think that the logic between the idea of public sector bodies saying that they, I mean, what we have heard is that okay, we know we should comply with this. We know there are requirements, and we had this report from the monitoring agency. But because no one is actually telling us that there's a problem, how important can it be? So it could be maybe a push for them if they know that there are real people out there who has a need. That was kind of, I think, the logic behind the not knowing. So we don't know if not knowing is really not knowing or not prioritizing, of course. But yeah. So hopefully kind of a face or an idea that there's a human need behind this would hopefully make them a little bit more interested. I don't know, Katie, in France, I guess there is no real feedback system, but how does the disability movement what do they do to?
Well, at the moment, we do what we're doing, setting up this type of observatory, this sort of dashboard. We do a lot of advocacy, but I think that to get back to this web, the accessibility statement and how you encourage users to report feedback, I think that they're trying to do possibly 2 things in the same form. Certainly in France, we have we have a model which all public bodies have to follow. It's stipulated in the RGAA, which is the national methodology, which is part of French legislation. So the contact detail, there is a contact detail, an address to contact if you encounter a problem, but it's not actually being addressed. It's sort of going into the ether somewhere at present. But that's right at the bottom of this very formal piece of legal documentation. Certainly it has lots of important information about the type of, if it's been done properly, about the type of errors that have been detected, what tests have been done, when they were done. That's all very useful, but I'm not sure that the common user is going to be looking at the very bottom of such a document on how they can flag issues. And so I think that maybe we should separate the 2 in some way, make that contact mechanism as quick and easy as possible to find. And also I think it's something we touched upon yesterday, maybe make the threshold quite low to be able to flag an issue, not put people off by a very complex form which tries to capture as much information as possible, but maybe allow an initial sort of a way to flag something, but then if they want to, then they can then go on and give a bit more information about the type of environment they're using, what assistive technology they're using, that type of thing. But anything really that can put the user back in the process. I mean, I absolutely agree. There needs to be that basic baseline of accessibility that is coming through the guidelines and following the standards. But I think it has to go par and par with the user. You have to really put the user back, keep them in very much in sight.
Yes, thank you. And I think there is really a balance, and we touched about that also yesterday, the balance between lowering the threshold so that people do provide feedback, but not also from the other side, for the public sector body, they need a little bit of information to actually do something about that feedback, because otherwise it becomes kind of not actionable. So it's really a balance, finding that balance. So Mohammed, when you are not yet in the scope of any legislation and you don't really have a fine-tuned process for end user feedback. So how do you push accessibility forward within Deutsche Bahn? I mean, what's your key to making people do the right thing? If you can't use the law yet, and you don't really have the direct input from users. So what's your trick?
No, it isn't a trick, because we have the European Accessibility Act, and this is 2025 it comes, and everybody who are in the software development knows we only have 2 years, and it's too late to begin now. Okay, so we have started a long time ago, and we have a lot of websites, app that must be all get accessible, and there's a lot of to do. And what we do is get first of all a commitment from our management. Yeah, we want get accessible. Okay, that's the first part. It's illegal because we must get accessible, but it's a commitment too from our management that says, okay, for us that's important. And now the product owner knows, okay, I must do it. And my manager who look at my product wants it too. So what can I do? And then now comes my team, and we help them to know the path what they should do. And we in our company, everybody who starts in our company, so in the onboarding gets a presentation about accessibility, and we tell them, for us that's very important. And if you are in a project that you develop something, please know that accessibility is a software quality that our company wants, and that's the beginning of all. Then if you know you must make your website accessible, and you know you haven't any clue how to do this, the next step is get the information. So get workshops, and they come to us, say, can you help us, give us the knowledge? And that's the step 2. And when they get the knowledge, they go and produce the very nice app or very nice website and come to us. Now it's finished. Can you make the test for us? And it's a chain. Accessibility is always a chain. So we can talk about, is monitoring something that we need, or the accessibility statements. Yeah, it's important, because before you can make an accessibility statement, you must get the test. Otherwise, you can't make a statement, because you don't know if you are accessible or not. So it's a chain from beginning to end, but we start with the end in law and says this document must be there. And if you want the document, you need the test. And before you don't know what's accessibility, you know you will fail, so you get the knowledge. Okay, so I think it's a chain, and yeah, that's our way of what we do.
So I like the fact that you consider accessibility as a quality measurement and not something kind of extra. So I think that is really a takeaway that we can all use in that. So I would like to know if we now think about the stakeholders here that are now in scope of this directive, how could we support them and help them to make things better? So we have talked about accessibility statements and we've talked about feedback, but what else can we do? The end user organizations or the commission or the industry, what kind of how do we make sure that we move this forward? Gottfried seems to think that we are not moving forward as fast as we could. So there's possibly more things to do. So what is lacking out there, Peter? What do you think?
Wow. Well, I would take this to involving the user. So the mechanisms are there. There's the statement, there's the monitoring, there's the correspondence between the monitoring body and the public sector body. There's a law, there's a standard. So everything is available on a technical level. What not only me, many of us find one of the main problems is that when it turns into something technical, when it turns into something, okay, we should do this, follow this list. It is about user needs, and user needs are very varied, very different. So the only way I think to make it efficient is to involve the users, as usually from the beginning. So when you set up a monitoring mechanism, you should involve the users and see if those are the imported parts, for example, for the simplified monitoring, or that everything is covered, or the most user needs are covered in the in-depth monitoring. When you set up a feedback mechanism, you talk to the users first to see if this is what they need, this is how it should work. What else is there? Accessibility statement. It should be accessible. It should be understandable for the users. It should provide the information they need, because that's one of the main goals. And something take away from the conversation yesterday, the discussion yesterday, was that even the reports, the member state reports, should be done in a way that end users can understand and can actually react on. The member state reports every 3 years, or some member states actually do it yearly internally, may detail the monitoring mechanism, show some results, and end users can say, hey, this is not really what is interesting, or the monitoring could be done differently, or you should focus on this because this is what is really, really the most efficient thing to fix first. So I think that even with the best intentions, without involving the users, it won't be a real success and it won't work.
Okay, so that puts a lot of pressure now on the public sector bodies to do all of that. So, but hopefully they will do some of it at least.
Well, I mean, the public sector is there for the public, so.
Well, okay. Well, that's fair enough. So, Katie, what do you think? What can anyone do? Society, we, you?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is a question more about society and how we put those questions firmly on the agenda from the get-go. And when I mean that, the get-go, I mean from primary schools, junior school, secondary school, that we're considering inclusion in the same way we're starting to talk about security, privacy, consentment, all these things that are societal issues. We're just, if someone understands why we're asking them to do all of these relatively technical, but not only technical things, then it all becomes much easier. And I think we were saying yesterday that awareness raising is always going to be the big issue here. And it's something that we both you're going to be talking about training later, but in order to become an accessibility professional, you need to know the profession exists. You need to know that there is a need out there. So I think that if young children are being made aware of this from the get-go, then this should be something that's just embedded in our society. So I think we are absolutely talking about a bigger question, and the government should be leading on that question.
So it becomes bigger and bigger. So Mohammed, can you make this even bigger? Are we going to a universe with this? Or how can society or stakeholders or you as an expert help public sector bodies to, or other stakeholders to become more accessible? Is there something that hasn't been mentioned yet, involving users?
Yeah, it's always a lot of smaller parts that gets when you take each together, that it's take bigger. The first is for the people who must do the whole thing. Why should I do? And not because I want the legal says it. Where's the motivation? And that's our first part when people come to our company. We motivate them and show why accessibility is so helpful and why a lot of people, including their self, profit from the accessibility. Every of us will get older, and then it's a topic that the first part, so motivate the people, get the international motivation. And the another part is we need experts. Okay, today everybody can say I'm an accessibility expert. Okay, so you can search for it and you have, but are they experts? So we need some kind of certificate that people know who can advise me. So otherwise somebody advise me and make everything worse as it is now. Yeah, okay, so we need some more professional on the accessibility part. Okay, a lot we talk about accessibility, but maybe we need something that we can rely on it. Okay.
So thank you for giving me that opportunity to say IAAP in certification again, because that is one of the things that we also believe in, the professional certification, and of course education. And education leads me to Gottfried again, finishing off before we start with the questions from the audience. So what do you think could be done, and who could help the universities or public sector bodies at whole to, I mean, what is required more than just the monitoring and feedback?
I think we need to shift our efforts more to the left of the process. So shift left. So what we've been talking about so far is mostly testing web pages by monitoring agencies, getting feedback on already finished websites. We need to start at the beginning, and there is actually where we need the professionals that Mohammed was talking about, and we need to have people who know about accessibility in procurement. And we're making some progress on that now, at least in Germany, what I can see. They need to know how to build into the contract the requirements of accessibility. And we need, of course, when we start our own developments, like in universities, we do our websites on our own. We need to educate people, developers, designers, how to make this accessible, and involve the user at the very beginning in requirements workshops and in design workshops. And shift left, I think that's really the way we need to go, and it will make it more effective and more efficient than the current approach. And of course, to add that, also public agencies need to get the resources, the money, the time, the budget to carry that out and to build up competence from the ground in their personnel.
Yes, so the eternal question about resources. Sometimes I tend to think that it's a question about priorities, but of course there need to be some human resources somewhere and some money. So thank you for that. And we have some questions from the audience. So one is, do you really expect feedback from someone who could complain 10 times a day? So this is I mean, what we have talked about many times, that we cannot kind of impose on the end users to spend all their life providing feedback or complaining. So are we putting too much pressure on the users and kind of expecting too much from the user here? Are we part of the problem when we talk so much about feedback? Yes, Mohammed, please.
Yeah, I think the user feedback is the end point. You have a very good website or a very good app that people should use, and somewhere it's get a problem, it get a barrier, and they come and say, okay, please fix that. I love your website, but this I can't use. But if I go on a website and nothing works, why should I give a feedback? I click back and go to the next Google research, Google result. Okay, so that's the part. The user aren't there to help you make your website more accessible. No, it must be nearly perfect, and the user loves you and give you feedback, but not other ways. So I go on with my website, and if the user call me that he can't use it, maybe I do something. No, the user isn't there to give us feedback how bad we are. The good thing is he must write to us how good we are. That's the bad thing.
Yeah, I would really. I've met many website owners in the public sector. I've never heard anyone say, I want them to love my website, but I really hope that's the end goal for them. Yeah. but I don't think, I think there's a difference sometimes maybe between the public sector and the private sector. And also, as we talked about also yesterday, that there may be nowhere else to go. If I need to talk to my municipality, I cannot say this website sucks and I choose another municipality, because so the public sector, you don't really have a choice as a user sometimes in the public sector when you're.
Yeah, of course. But then I search for the phone and I call them, and that will be maybe an angry discussion.
Well, hopefully not. Let's be constructive instead. So we have another question here, and that's from the university standpoint. How can we educate the future tech team to understand accessibility requirements and its need better? So Gottfried, I guess this is for you.
Two answers. First, of course, as always, we need to educate them. We need to build awareness and teach them how to do this. But oftentimes they say we don't have time. We're already working on overtime. And so just one example how we did it. I think successfully, we used a tool, a monitoring tool that reports on the status of the website of the university every 2 weeks. And we all know these tools do not discover all errors, maybe if it's good, 30%. But then we talk with the web admins about the report of the tool, and we talk what should be done to fix the issues. And we talk also about issues that could occur in the website, but cannot be detected by the tool. And then we kind of grow the level and raise the level of competence like every other week. And it doesn't seem to be a burden on the web admins. They don't need to invest extra time. It's really more of helpful things, and they learn by doing their work. That's one example for that we can use.
Okay, thank you very much. So we got also some comments about that. It's not only about feedback, but also the response time. So that is actually in the directive. But if it works or not is another question. And then somebody says that public sector doesn't need people to love their website; they just need them to work for everyone, which is of course true as well. So thank you very much for sharing your insights on this, and thank you for the questions. And we'll move on to the next panel. Thank you very much.
Thank you.